It's time for the Phil Ferguson Show.
Buongiorno tutti. Hello, everybody. This is Phil Ferguson, and you are listening to The Phil Ferguson Show. This is show number 228, and a little later in the show, we will talk to Ian Harris, a skeptical, rational, atheistic-y kind of comedian who's making his mark in the world with skeptical humor. So we're going to have good fun talking to him. Of course, before we get into that, we're going to cover a topic that I haven't covered in a while, apparently. I've mentioned it casually, and I've given talks on it, but I haven't covered it in detail on the show for almost a year and a half, so I figured it was time, in part because I got a couple of emails, and it's interesting how something doesn't get a whole lot of attention, and then seemingly out of the blue, I get several emails around the same topic. In the last few weeks, I had several emails about employee stock purchase programs before and after I did the episode. After, I understand, but before was kind of odd. But hey, it's great because it helps give me ideas for show topics. So, of course, if you have any clever ideas or questions that you just can't wrap your head around or want to know more about, or you want to hear my input on them, if that has any value to you, you can send me an email, phil@polarisfinancialplanning.com. And maybe I can cover it on the show. I do get a lot of emails now, so it's getting hard to do that. Someone did recently suggest that I have Dave Ramsey on my show. Yeah, like that's going to happen. We did do a Dave Ramsey episode a while back. I can't remember which number, but if you could Google that and find it. But I did talk about saving for college in episode 160, which was back in March of 16. So like I said, it's been about a year and a half. And I'm going to cover some of the same stuff I discussed then, and I'm going to go into some more detail in response to a particular email that I did receive. A couple of things that I probably need to do this more often. Just the reminders that none of what I tell you, the listener, yes, I'm talking to you now, none of what I say on the show is specific investment advice for you. And this is meant to be educational, perhaps entertaining, we'll see, but informative is the goal, to try to educate. Then you can go do your own research. You can hire your own advisor. You can do it on your own, but don't just go off and do something because you liked something that I said on one episode or even a few episodes of a show. Really understand what you're doing. You can read the books that I recommend. Just real quick, since I mentioned that, The Richest Man in Babylon, read that first. And then second, A Random Walk Down Wall Street. And if you really want to get into the detail, Common Sense on Mutual Funds. And that third book, I do insist that you buy it in paper format. It may have been a while since you bought a physical book, and I don't even think it comes in paperback, so you have to buy the hardback. It's still only $20, $25. A great investment in your time. The reason I want you to buy the book, because if you listen to it on Audible or some audiobook format in 16, 20 hours, 30 hours, however long this book is, you'll be done and you'll think you understood it all. You did not. If you get it on Kindle, you'll read through it. That's fine. But I want you to have the hard copy. I want you to sit in front of a computer. If you know the material pretty well, maybe you can just do it in Kindle. But it is filled with tables, graphs, charts, that sometimes doesn't really translate very well on Kindle. It's really a book that you need the physical copy of, so keep that in mind. In reference to saving for college, let me get back on topic here. So don't take investment advice from the radio show, and keep in mind my advice is in context with my overall philosophy, my overall style. If you don't follow other parts of what I recommend, this may make no sense to you. It may not even be a good idea for you. So something to keep in mind. And the other thing, of course, is that this is not true for everybody. There are exceptions to every idea, every concept. As an example, if you are just rolling in piles of dough and you have nowhere else to put it, and you've maxed out every possible 401k and IRA and Roth IRA, and you still want to put money aside for your kids, and you have more than 2 or 3 kids, especially the more kids the better, and you want to pile a lot of dough into 529s, might not be a bad idea. It's a way to dodge some taxes, at least for now. But for most people, this is not the best way to manage your money, and we're going to go through that. So the first thing is I make the comparison to being on an airline, being on a flight, and the stewardesses, the flight attendants. I think I'll go with that. The flight attendants, when they go through their script, they tell you if the oxygen masks drop from the overhead compartment, always put on yours first before helping a child or someone who has a need. Because if you have any trouble getting theirs on and yours is not on, you're both in trouble. Same thing with saving for your kids. If you are not saving enough for your own retirement, you should not be saving any money for your child's education. I know that's brutally harsh, but I have had people come to me in their mid-50s, late 50s, and even their early 60s, and they're now done funding all of their children's, God, I can't talk today, education, and they wanted to start saving for their own retirement. Well, they're in a deep pile of shit because that's hard to fix. If you come to me at 55 and say, I'm ready to start saving, you have a problem. Your ability to retire from 55 to 65, if you only start saving at 55, is really, really going to be a challenge unless you can sock away something like 50% of everything you make. And even then, you're going to have to live on a much lower lifestyle than you think you're going to have to live on, or you're going to have to keep working. So it becomes a problem for you. You need to take care of yourself first. If you save for yourself, and if you do really well, you could always spend more than you expected on college. So that's one thought. Another thought is that often within college saving plans, which are often in the category of 529, although some states have different programs, and this is another thing, 529s are run separately within each state. Because when this was being set up by Congress, the industry got involved and made it state dependent so that the industry could compete state to state. And it screwed it all up. So every state has a plan. Some of them are horrible, absolutely god-awful, and some are okay. One of the problems that these plans have is there's limited amounts of money that you can put in. Maybe other relatives can put in. You have often very limited options at what you can do with the money. So you may not be able to have good investment choices. And if you have good investment choices, the expense ratios may be higher. And I've seen where, and I've seen this in 401ks also, but with 529s, they might offer something that I love, Vanguard index funds or Fidelity or Schwab index funds, but they're not 0.1 or 0.2%. They're 1.3%. And you think to yourself, how does that happen? Well, the administrator charges an extra 1% to manage it for you, even though it's automated and you're never going to get to talk to anybody and they're not doing anything. But they also know that you're going to take the money out in a few years. Most families cannot save for college when their children are 1, 2, 5, 8. They start saving a little later on. And so if you start saving when your child is 10 and you expect them to go to college at 18, you're going to start taking the money out in 8 years. They don't have a 20, 30, 40-year life cycle like your retirement account might be to make money off of you. They have to make it in a very short period of time, so the fees are going to likely be higher. So you have higher expense ratios, you have limited options, and one of the things that the funds are going to want to do, and this is what gets to the email, so let me just jump to this. This is, I'll just call it from JC because it's cute, right? JC, I'm sure you got that the first time. I've been listening for about a year, and we've communicated via email once before. I greatly appreciate your approach to the world, and I have a quick question. My wife and I have 3 children. I'm going to skip the ages, but they're all under 10. Before I started listening to your show, we started a 529 for each of them. 2 years ago, we seeded it with $1,000 apiece. I'm modifying a little bit here to make it shorter. We don't contribute regularly, but we make family members aware of it as a preferred birthday or Christmas option. I do like that. Quite frankly, even with high expenses and some of the other problems with 529s, if your family is giving cash to you, a.k.a. your children, instead of some pointless, stupid gift that is going to break in a few months, that's definitely better. So I don't have a problem with that. But it's just another, here they have 3 more accounts they have to track. I recently looked at the investment options and noticed how heavily invested in bonds they are. I've included an attachment, and I went through it. I know you don't recommend saving for college. True. The episode here will prove that again. But if something already exists, would you manage it the same way as you would for retirement? I.e., would you stay 100% in stocks until 10 to 12 years before you need the money and then build a cushion of around 30%? So the last part there, no, I don't treat this the same way as I would treat retirement. And the reason is, in retirement, you expect, you hope, I guess, if you retire at 62 or 65, that you might be spending that money for 20, 30, 40 years, some long period of time, or leaving a large chunk of it to your heirs or some charity. However, the money on the 529, it should be your intent. I'm assuming it's your intent to spend it. And you're going to spend it rather quickly. And in this case, the person who wrote me the email, if you have $1,000 in there, even with a little here, a little there, and family gifts, it's probably not going to be enough to even cover tuition for the first year of college. So it's going to disappear, poof, in the first year. And you want to spend it, poof, in the first year. Why drag it out? It's underperforming, and it's mostly in bonds. So another reason to not save for college is that you're going to have a more conservative portfolio. Maybe up to the age of 10, 11, you want to be almost all stocks for a college plan, but then you want to rapidly ramp up to being close to 100% bonds, 80 to 100% bonds by the time they go to college, because you are about to spend all of the money. The fact that it might go up 10% is not worth the risk of possibly losing 30, 40, 50% months before you want to go spend it all. Now, so that's a problem. The other thing that is a problem that's often not discussed with college saving plans is that they can actually hurt your ability to get aid. Now, when you talk to someone that sells a 529 plan, and almost all of them are sold, they have advisors that hook up to them and they sell them to you, and they get paid a commission to get you to put your money in there. They tell you that there's a form that you fill out, which is true, called the FAFSA, and that the United States government cannot consider the money in the 529 when calculating whether you qualify for financial aid. And for most people, the amount of money the government is going to calculate that you can spend for college is going to blow your mind. It is a staggering large amount of money that they think you are going to be able to spare to start paying for college. So you're not going to get a whole lot of aid unless you make very little money, and then you can't save in a 529 anyway. You're not going to get much aid, and unless we have a different attitude in government about funding education, I don't see that changing. You're not going to get much from the government at all. But then the information on the FAFSA goes to any college or university that you select to get it. They are not bound to follow the same rules that the United States government is. And in one of my rare libertarian moments, I don't think they should be. Because the university, if they look at 2 equal students, and one has no money saved for college, and the other one has $100,000 in a 529 with their goddamn name on it, they should give the aid to someone who has no money. And of course, you could say, but Phil, I'm being penalized for doing the right thing. Yes, you are. You put money in a 529 for your student. The university looks at it, and they see it's for your student. It has their name on it. It's pretty clear that it's meant for college. It's in a 529 account. What are they supposed to do? Who would you give money to? Someone that has no money or someone that has 100,000? Each university is different, and I don't know the rules of the university that you want to go to. Matter of fact, I don't know the rules for any specific university. But you could lose grants, tuition waivers, job assistance, all kinds of opportunities that the university has. They might dole them out to other students. Or you could have your children decide not to go to college. Maybe they want to do something else that the 529 does not qualify for, and you could end up in a position where you're stuck and have to take the money out, possibly pay penalties and taxes on all the growth after making next to nothing for a long period of time. Not a successful way to plan for your retirement. So you need to focus on maxing out your 401ks, your IRAs, your Roth IRAs. I talk about it on the show on a regular basis, saving 20% for yourself. If you're saving that 20%, and if you're on target to retire and have extra money and wanting to use a 529, may not be a bad idea. I'm not going to fight you on it. But if you're not saving 20% for yourself, you need to do that first. I'll have people tell me, well, if I don't start saving for my child's education now, I'll never be able to pay for it. Okay, maybe you just aren't going to be able to pay for it. Maybe you just don't have the income sufficient. But if you don't have the income sufficient to help them pay for college, then you obviously don't have the income to pay for college and save for yourself. And your children, when they're 25 and 30 and they've got the college degree that you helped them buy and they've got a nice fancy job, are they going to start kicking back money to you when you go into retirement? It could happen. I just don't see that as being very likely. It's rare for children to just give up 10 or 15% of their annual income to mom and dad. Of course, with everything, there's exceptions. So you have to take care of yourself first. 529s have limited options. 529s have higher expense ratios. Often they have quarterly fees or annual fees on top of the high expense ratios. And then you're going to underperform because you're going to want to put the vast majority of the money into conservative, low-yielding investments, short-term bonds making 1%, 2%, 3%. If that money was in your retirement account, you can invest for the long run, hopefully making something close to 10. And then you say, of course, well, how do I then pay for college? Well, if you make, as a couple, let's just say $100,000 a year, and you're saving 20% a year, or $20,000, when your child goes to college, you could stop saving for retirement for a couple of years and take that 20% or $20,000 and help pay for college. If you've done really well with your portfolio and you have more money than you thought and you're ahead of schedule, you can pay more. Maybe the student can get some loans. Maybe they can work some. If college is going to be $40,000, if you can kick up 20, and they can make 5, 8, or 10 working part-time during the year, maybe they borrow 5, maybe they borrow 8 a year, and they have debt of 25 or 30,000 when they start their working world. Not a huge amount compared to some people, but still a lot of money. And again, you could always help pay down that debt later if you are in the position to do so. So that's a lot of things about 529s and saving for college and why you probably shouldn't be doing that. Of course, if you have grandkids and you're sitting on a giant pile of cash and you want to fund their college, totally different. That's fine. We've also had cases, I've had clients where, especially if you only have one child, it gets real tricky because if that one child decides not to go to college, you're stuck. Or on the other extreme, which is delightful, they get a tuition. They get a scholarship. Then they get a full ride, whether it's because of mathematics or because they're good at soccer or some other activity that they're really good at, or they do work and research and get scholarships and aid, and you don't need the 529 money. Now you have a problem. Again, you might have to pay taxes and penalties to get it out. So all those things combine for me. For most people, you should not put money in 529s, and that's why I say you should not save for college. We'll take a quick break, and we'll go into our talk with Ian Harris.
Hey you, it's me, Sarah Silverman. You know, lately I've noticed a lot of really sad, really long commercials on TV with, like, grossly sick, emaciated people from all over the world. And it turns out they look that way because they don't have food. And I know what you're thinking. If you don't like it, Silverman, TiVo passed it. I did. You still see them. Especially because, like, I have a 48-inch plasma high-def TV. So every devastating image is in, like, brilliant, crisp, vivid, like they're in my apartment, you know. So how do I get these people out of my apartment, basically? And I think I figured it out. Like, all I have to do is end world hunger. And then I'm like, okay, how are you going to end world hunger? And then it hit me. Sell the Vatican, feed the world. Think about it. We need a hero, and who is more primed to be our hero than the Pope? He's literally a caped crusader. What is the Vatican worth, like $500 billion? This is great. Sell the Vatican, take a big chunk of that money, build a gorgeous condominium for you and all of your friends to live in, all the amenities, swimming pool, tennis court, water slide. And with the money left over, feed the whole fucking world. You preach to live humbly, and I totally agree. So now maybe it's time for you to move out of your house that is a city. On an ego level alone, you will be the biggest hero in the history of ever. And by the way, any involvement in the Holocaust, bygones. I know some of you out there are like, well, why don't those bums get a job like the rest of us? Well, did you know that the average Arby's employee in Ethiopia only gets paid nothing an hour because they don't have one. They don't have one. The bottom line is this. If you sell the Vatican and you take that money and you use it to feed every single human being on the planet, you will get crazy pussy. All the pussy. And I don't mean literally. That might not be your cup of tea. I don't know what your version of all the pussy is. But you'll get all the pussy. Amen.
All right, everyone. Welcome back. This is Phil Ferguson, and you are still listening to The Phil Ferguson Show. With me now, I have Ian Harris. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well. How are you doing, Phil?
I'm doing pretty good, and you and I have met multiple times, and it seems like your claim to fame in the skeptical atheistic movement is comedy, right? That seems like you're in.
Yeah, that is definitely my in is it's skeptical comedy, I guess. I don't know.
Skeptical comedy is where's the last few places you've been? I do a lot of my own like self-produced theater shows, and I just did the American Atheist Conference, which you were at as well. Indeed.
Performed there, and then hosted that as well.
That's a funny story. Let's stick to that for a minute.
Okay.
You knew you were going to the American Atheist Convention.
Yes,
right?
I did.
And you knew at some point you were going to give a talk. Is that what you were scheduled to do?
Yeah. So there was a slight miscommunication. It was more than likely on my part, but yeah, I knew that I was doing a comedy show on Sunday night, doing like stand-up comedy, and then I'd be opening and hosting for the movie that they watched, God's Not Dead 2, and it was Frank and Trace from Mystery Science Theater 3000, and they were doing a little Mystery Science Theater 3000 of God's Not Dead 2, which was hysterical. And I thought that's what I was doing. I didn't realize that I was hosting the entire event. So when you say hosting the entire event, you're like the MC for the weekend, and you introduce all the talks, and you have to talk up all the presenters before they come on stage, kind of thing? Yes, exactly that, and which I love doing, and I have no problem doing. I just thought it was funny because in the email Dave Silverman, and said, "Yeah, I want you to do comedy and do this comedy event and host." And I thought he meant host the comedy event.
Oh, that's the English language thing there.
Host the entire thing.
And so when did you find out that you were hosting the entire event?
It was about 20 minutes after the event started.
Oh.
I was in my room, and I got a Facebook call from Angie, who's a friend, who's a doctor, who was also giving a speech there. You know, a lot of people know Angie, and she's like, "What the hell are you doing?" And I said, "What are you talking about?" She said, "Where are you?" I said, "It's 7 a.m. my time. I just came in from Los Angeles. I'm sleeping in my room." And she said, "You're supposed to be hosting. Get down here." And I said, "What? It's Saturday morning. I'm not on until tomorrow night." She goes, "You're hosting this thing. Get your butt down here." And I ran down, and Dave Silver was like, "What are you doing?" I said, "I didn't know that you wanted me to host." He goes, "Yeah, that's what you're here for." And I said, "All right, well, who's up?" And then I just, which is funny because normally I would have probably dressed in a suit. I would have brought, or at least several pairs of nice clothes, because I was going to be hosting for 3 days, and I would have, called all the performers ahead or the speakers ahead of time and got a good intro from them. So I was kind of flying by the seat of my pants, but no one seemed to know. Everyone said that I did a good job, and everyone was coming up to me going, "Wow, your hosting is great. We enjoy it." There was a few little tech problems here and there that I had to kind of talk my way through for 5 or 10 minutes while they had to deal with some tech problems, and no one seemed to notice. And my only regret is that I was in a T-shirt every day, but because that's I didn't plan on. Yeah. I didn't bring any other nice clothes, so I just wore a different T-shirt every day. But I don't think anybody had a problem with it, so that was good. No,
and the one thing that I don't think you had anything to do with it. It kept running late. The whole conference.
Yeah, there was definitely. I think there were a few tech issues due to there were a few things that happened, including there was some sort of equipment issue. They got in a car accident on the way out there with all the equipment.
Oh, yeah, I heard about that.
Yeah, so there was a few things where stuff wasn't, and the hotel itself may have had some issues. So there was a couple times where they couldn't quite get the PowerPoints up. I'd introduce somebody and they'd say, "Oh, hold up, the PowerPoint's not working," and it would take like 5 or 10 minutes to get the PowerPoint up. And you do that 3 times and you're 30 minutes behind. So,
well, I don't know if the person wants to be mentioned. The person that did all of the video and a lot of the sound equipment drove from Southern California to South Carolina, almost to the ocean, to bring all the equipment. Ocean. Yeah, and a day or so into the drive, their vehicle failed, and so they rented a new vehicle and put everything in the new vehicle, and then started towing their trailer with the new vehicle. And apparently, the new vehicle wasn't properly equipped to handle pulling a trailer, so at some point they fishtailed into a guardrail, and some equipment got damaged, and had to get a third vehicle that was better able to pull the vehicle behind, the trailer behind, and then got there almost a whole day late, and they ended up setting up the sound and the cameras overnight before the event started.
Yeah, it was, and still did a pretty dang amazing job. I mean, all things considered, it was, it was pretty intense when he told me the stuff that happened on the way out there. I said, "I can't believe you guys even made it here, much less are able to get up and running by 10 in the morning the next day." But yeah, it was pretty impressive. And you always have, anytime you're in a hotel, you're always going to be dealing with their system, their server, all of that sort of stuff, which, you never know how that's going to go.
Yeah, it's interesting because my regular listeners probably know, and I DJ parties and have DJ'd for years. And when we worked together at the Reason Rally, I was the talent, right? And I just showed up with my laptop and plugged it into the system, and then we still had problems where they couldn't seem to understand what I wanted to do, the guys that were doing the sound, because it wasn't my equipment. So
right.
I get wanting to have your own stuff, but just weird. Matter of fact, I just did a wedding party, wedding service and ceremony and reception for a niece
Oh yeah.
just this last weekend, and it was one of those things that everything went just right.
Yeah, see, that never happens. that almost never happens. Yeah, the Reason rally, that was another one where the hotel, that was all on the hotel with our after party, because there were two, and you and I were involved with. I was helping put together the one that you were in, and we also had Monster on Sunday. It was a really good atheist hard rock band.
Well, and
the sound check system, the guy didn't show up till like 20 minutes before the thing was supposed to start. It's like, we have to sound check a band. You can't show up 20 minutes before.
I was going to say,
it was just silly.
I could do that, but it's one of those things, and Ian, chime in if you disagree with me, and that's okay. But I tell people, if you're organizing an event, if you're organizing an after party of some kind, do not mix bands and DJ. It doesn't work. What do you say to this, Ian?
I tend to agree. I would say we had this discussion beforehand. They wanted a whole bunch of bands and a whole bunch of DJs. I think they wanted to mix like band then DJ at first. Yeah. And I talked them out of that, and I said, look, we had already booked the band from San Diego. They were already coming out, and then they covered a lot of it themselves because they really wanted to play for it. So my thought was, and having two after parties, I get it. There's two different hotels, people staying on different sides of the city or whatever. It was confusion for a lot of people because they didn't know which after party to go to, and but I think I'm okay if there's a couple bands to kick off a show, and then you run, you go out with a DJ. If it's smooth, you have a band or two and it's something live and it's early, and then when it's like dance time, it's getting late, you do 2-3 hours of DJ and everyone's out on the dance floor and they're drunk and they're dancing and they're doing their thing. I don't have a problem with that so much. But if you're going to have like 5 bands and then a DJ, that's just too much for anybody.
Well, I know when you got thrown in last minute, and it was interesting because I ended up performing at Crystal City. The other one was, I don't know what it's called, but more in DC proper. And last minute, I find out I'm at Crystal City, and you got thrown in to be in charge of this thing because someone else was doing it, which is great, but they got reassigned to something else, and you came in. And I remember the conversation you and I had where we were talking about this, multiple bands, and then I would kind of DJ for 15 or 20 minutes between each band. And I was kind of douchey about it. But I was like, yeah, if that's what you want, I'm out. And you're like, whoa, don't bail on me, dude. I just started this gig. What's going on?
Yeah, well, but I was kind of in agreement with you. It's I do think that it's fine to have, if there's somebody there who can just play some music while bands are shipping out, so that people aren't sitting there with dead airspace. Like, okay, this band's out, and you got to change it to a new band. All right, run some, have somebody play some music at least house music, something to where people are like, okay, cool, and I'm fine with that. But as a DJ who wants to actually play music and get a rhythm going and have a build going, their DJ also needs their time to do their thing, which is more than 15, 20 minutes. That person needs an hour, 2 hours, whatever, 3 hours to build and do a whole, they're a performer too. So,
and I guess I got kind of lucky because you do stand-up. If you're given, an hour to perform and then you show up and they say you've only got 15 minutes, you're ruined. I mean, sure, you can do it, but that's not the show you made. So now you've got to cut and trim and try to get some kind of flow in 15 minutes when you expected to be up there for an hour. It's a very different performance.
Yeah, absolutely. And conversely, we also had to deal with the fact that we had a couple bands, the local bands, not too big of a deal, but we have Monster on Sunday, who they're a really good, legit band, and it's like they're coming all the way out from San Diego to Washington D.C. and they wanted to play, and it's like they're like, hey, we want to be like at the right time, headlining set, and rock this place and do whatever, and that's what they had expected. So it's like, so I think what we ended up doing was trimming it down to like 2 bands and you, which I think was good. Our downfall on that party was that the hotel was not equipped for the bands at all.
No.
So it took them forever, and they weren't there on time for the sound check. The sound guy who they had hired was doing both events, so he couldn't be at two places at once. So he was at the other, with the Cap City one or whatever it was called. So he was there. Meanwhile, we had no one supervising our setup and sound check. And then the first band was so loud, and that a lot of people left during the first band because it was too loud and just wasn't done properly. So people were coming in, and this first band is just, the sound check was horrible, and people are going, it's too loud in there, I can't handle it. So we probably lost like 40% of the people that came to the party right off the bat. And had they known that, hey, we fixed it and we got it all taken care of, and from Monster on Sunday and then Phil DJ, it was great. The party was awesome, but the first hour was so rough that I feel like we lost a lot of people.
Well, it was funny because the sound engineer, if I dare use that terminology, I talked to him before I went on, and I said, let's experiment. Once we get it set to the right volume, don't touch anything. I'm going to run it all from my end. And he kept changing my volumes. And I'm like, no, I have a purpose for doing what I'm doing. Leave it alone.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, there was a little bit smaller crowd than everyone, all of us would have wanted, but we did have some good fun. So that was nice. So you did the American Atheist thing. We partied together at the Reason Rally, and you do some stand-up now? You're outside of the atheist community?
Yeah, I mean, that's been my job for the last 25 years. That's how I make a living, that and voiceover work. So I've been touring, doing comedy since I was 21 years old, basically. And yeah, so the cool thing is nowadays I don't do as many comedy clubs because I gear so much of what I do to skepticism, science, and atheism. That if I'm playing the Chuckle Hut in Indiana somewhere, they don't really appreciate 45 minutes of, hey, your God is ridiculous jokes.
Yeah.
Or, hey, let me talk about science jokes. So, I still have some other stuff that I can play those rooms when I need to, but I don't do as much of that as I used to. But yeah, that was my hustle for years. I mean, I spent 40, 50 weeks on the road some years, just going from comedy club to comedy club, one-nighter to one-nighter. And, yeah, it's what I love doing. It's really cool that I got to merge it with the other thing that I love, which is skepticism and, activism and atheism. And, and what happened was I had taken a couple of years off when I had my daughter in 2005. So like 2006 to 2011, I basically quit comedy. I didn't go on the road. I didn't want to be on the road at all with a kid. So I stayed at home. I ended up not going up and doing comedy in town because I just was not wanting to do that. And I basically took 5.5 years off of comedy and was missing it so much. And that's how I identified. But my daughter was 6 years old and had never known her dad as a comedian. And I said, I got to get back into this because this is who I am.
Yeah.
And what I did was I threw away my entire act, and I was like, if I'm going to go back to doing this, I don't need to make a living doing it anymore. It's not, now I can go back to doing it for the reason I started, which is I love comedy. And the last, 5-6 years have been the most prolific time of my life, because the most rewarding time of my life, because I'm just talking about what I enjoy talking about. And if a comedy club doesn't want to hire me, I don't have to kowtow to their specifications. If someone says, hey, we just don't want you talking about religion, or hey, we want you to be clean, or hey, we don't want you to do this, I just go, no thanks.
Yeah,
I don't need it.
It's a nice place to be. It's funny because with this the wedding that I just DJ'd for a relative, for a niece, a lot, I mean, it's all my wife's family. There's like 20, 30, 40 people there that I know, and they've never seen me do my thing. And by the time it was done, they're like, why aren't you doing this all the time? Because people would pay a lot of money because you're really good. I'm like, just because I'm really good at it doesn't mean I have to do it, though.
Right.
It's a lot of work. I mean, I did the reception and the the ceremony and the reception and all the setup and all the teardown. I mean, I was working from almost 8 in the morning until 2 in the morning to get all this set up and torn down and everything. It really, really wore me out. That's a long day.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. That's it's a lot of work, and it's, and for me, like I said, being on the road is a lot of work. It's hard work, and it's you're away from your family, and you're not eating properly, and and you're doing all these other things, and it is rewarding as it is when you get up on stage, and especially nowadays for me, it's like, it used to be you go to a comedy club and they're great crowds. There's 300 people there, but they all got in free. They'd be there whether it was you or whether it was whoever else, whatever other comedian was there last week or the next week.
Yeah.
They're just there to see comedy. When I book my own shows, sure, sometimes I sell 50 tickets. Sometimes I sell 100 tickets. Sometimes I do well and I sell 300 tickets. But all of those people, every single one of them paid money to see me. And that's such a different feeling than having, 10 sold-out shows at a comedy club where they were given free tickets to see some generic comedy. And I have to ride a certain line because I can't piss anybody off or do anything, too edgy or whatever. Versus, hey, I rented a theater and I sold 100 tickets and 100 people came and paid an actual price to come to a theater out of their way and see me and enjoy what I do and to be there to hear what I have to say. And because they enjoy what I say, and that's so much more rewarding. And if I can do that now a couple times a month and make some money and not have to rely on it, but still, do okay that way. And it's so much more. It's like I said, it's just so much more rewarding, and you get to be so much more free with the material you do or the show that you put together, and you're just not on anybody else's time. And
I'm just wondering,
could
you ever bill a show as a comedy rave? Does that even make sense?
I think with the right comics, yeah. If you had Dane Cook, I bet you could, but I don't know if kids on or people who I think it's two different types of things. People who it's funny because people I do mixed martial arts. I have a gym and I own a gym and I train fighters for UFC and that sort of stuff. It's like my hobby / other kind of job, and I always get fight promoters going, "Hey, how about before the show you get in the cage and do stand up?"
And you're like, "No thanks."
And I'm like, why would I ever want to do that?
Oh, no.
Like, there's going to be 1,000 people here, who all know you or whatever. But yeah, they know me as a fight trainer. They don't know me as a comedian. They're not going to want to hear me get up there and talk about, astrology and make fun of Bigfoot or whatever I do at a fight.
I could see that becoming something where your best material is now awful.
Right.
And they're just like, what is this? We paid for a fight. Who's this idiot? It just, it could be a huge hit or probably not.
Yeah. I'm sure it would probably be okay because people wouldn't expect it. They'd be like, oh, this is cool. I mean, if I went up and did, there's a good friend of mine who's a comic. His name is Adam Hunter, and he has a podcast called MMA Roasted. And he's not like is involved in the MMA world as I am in the sense, he wrestled in like high school and college, and he's, he loves MMA. He's heavily involved in the MMA industry, in the sense that he talks about it and he has his podcast and whatever. But he doesn't really train as much, or he doesn't train fighters. He doesn't fight. He doesn't do anything like that. But he has tons of material about that mixed martial arts world. And he has jokes about the fighters, and he has his whole podcast and his Twitter feed that's where he's kind of a roast of the fight world. And he could go up and do that because he's got an hour worth of material about MMA. I've got like maybe 3 jokes. You know what I mean? Because it's not my audience. I can't go to the American Atheist Conference and be like, hey, so Chuck Liddell, well, like no one cares. No one knows what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I wouldn't know anything. I can't follow mainstream, popular, global sports, let alone MMA. I just wouldn't even know anybody. Now, if I understand correctly, you have a movie, a film, a comedy show, something coming on DVD or planning to? What's going on with that?
Yeah, so it's kind of a long story. So yeah, I have an hour TV special. So I did one a couple years ago, 2014. I released one called Critical and Thinking, which, by the way, is still out on Amazon and iTunes, and for rent or whatever. But so I Critical and Thinking was my first one, and then I've also directed a few specials. So I had this this kind of like a verbal deal with the guy at Netflix. And he liked my first one, but they didn't pick it up for various reasons. And then they picked up one that I directed, and he said, "I really love this one." And I said, "Well, if I end up doing another one for myself, would you be down to picking it up?" And he said, "Yeah, absolutely." So we went through and we shot an entire, just a typical hour special, like you'd see Louis C.K. or George Carlin or Sarah Silverman or whoever do their hour special at a theater. I got the full crew. I had shot a really cool intro that has Penn Jillette and Kelly Carlin and Paul Provenza and Lawrence Krauss and Aaron Ra and Cara Santa Maria and Julia Sweeney, all these people talking about art and science and comedy. And I did this really cool thing, shot the special, did probably the best set of my life. It looks amazing. It's awesome. While we're finishing it, the guy who bought the first one from me, moved on and is no longer at Netflix.
Oh, and you've not had luck yet getting it in?
So now we've been trying, I've had my agent and people trying to get it to the new people at Netflix, and it's been since January. They've been trying to get someone to pick it up over there, and the problem is that they've got this thing where they're doing 52 specials a year. They got to do like one a week for a year, which you would think is like, wow, that's great. So you can get yours in. But the thing is that they're trying to do 52 specials that are Jerry Seinfeld, Louis C.K., Bill Burr, and so even though I could probably technically still sell mine and they could wedge it in there between Sarah Silverman's 10th special this year and Bill Burr's 100th special this year, whatever, I'm sure they could wedge mine in there somewhere. But they haven't decided to do that yet. So we're still trying to negotiate. We're still trying to talk to them. And if that doesn't happen, then I guess, what I'll have to do is just do what I go the VOD route, put it on Amazon, put it on iTunes, put it on Google Play for, $3 a download and market the hell out of it and get people to watch it, which, I don't think we'll have a problem doing that. But I'm really looking forward to Netflix. It's definitely worthy. I'm not just saying this because it's me. From somebody who's directed 5 specials for other comedians, this is my second special. I've seen every comedy special that's ever been put out on HBO or Showtime or Netflix, and I'm telling you, it's up there with the best of them from every aspect, from the production.
Well, I was going to say,
to my
if you want me
the set.
if you want me to call somebody at Netflix and tell them they have plenty of shit on Netflix, what's the problem with a good show?
You know what's funny though is that I did this. So, because I heard that a friend said, "Man, I talked to them and they sounded like they passed on your special." And I'm like, "Well, they haven't told my agent, they haven't told me, they haven't told my producer. No one knows that they passed." So I'm like, I don't think they did. If they did, they probably are just kind of sitting on it like a soft pass. So I said, I'm going to push really hard. And what I did is that on the Dogma debate and then on Facebook and whatever, I told people, I said, hey, it's help.netflix.com, and they have a thing there that says request a title.
Yeah.
So everyone go on there and request Ian Harris Extraordinary and email me or Facebook message me when you did it. And last week I had over 2,000 people say they requested it. So I'm like,
what?
Netflix is, and some people are like, I requested it twice. So, and that's just the people that emailed me. So I'm thinking to myself, well, I think I had 1,500 people. So I'm guessing close to 2,000 people last week messaged Netflix and said, we want to see Ian Harris Extraordinary. And I can't imagine that they've ever got that kind of a, influx for one show before. So I'm sure they know it's a publicity stunt, but my thought is, publicity stunt or no, how many messages do they have to get before they go, okay, this guy's got an audience, guy's got a following, people want to see this. He obviously has fans that are, or friends that are loyal enough to go and do this for him. We are having 2,000 individual, and because you have to check that you're not a robot, it has to come from a different URL or whatever, a different IP address. So it's 2,000 individual new people asking. That's got to mean something to them. I'm going to keep it up until I can get 10,000 people to.
Okay, so maybe we can help a little bit. Walk me through the steps. What would my listeners have to do to help you get this on Netflix?
Well, yeah, I mean, aside from if they can find an email, which I don't know what there is, you go to help.netflix.com.
Okay.
And then in there's a section that says I'm trying to find it. It says something about request a title. I'm going to find out exactly what it's called. Request a title, and then you can just you can just put in whatever title you want. And so mine is called Ian Harris Extraordinary. So just type in Ian Harris Extraordinary and
submit,
and hopefully they will submit, and hopefully they will listen. That's where I'm at with it. I don't know. Again, I don't know. I might get 100,000 views, and they may still go publicity stunt. Who knows?
Yeah. So that's going to happen. So you mentioned this MMA. You have your own gym, and you're training fighters, right?
Yes.
And is that just something you love to do? And how did you get involved with that?
So I have been training in martial arts and boxing and all of that sort of stuff since I was a kid. So I started boxing when I was 6 years old, and then I wrestled a little bit in junior high and high school, and I got into martial arts, like your traditional martial arts like Kempo and karate, kung fu, all that kind of stuff. When I was like 12, 13 years old, and I ended up, I've just been training something my entire life. So, started doing Taekwondo, then I started doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and I just started doing all the various forms of martial arts, and I've just always competed and trained people and ran some classes, and when I came off the road, when I was not, when I wasn't on the road full time anymore, I realized I had gained some weight and was not in the best shape of my life, and also was not. Was needing something else to do because, like I said, I wasn't on the road full time. So I started up a couple of classes. I started teaching some classes at a local a friend's school at night, and within a year or so, I had one. MMA was kind of becoming popularized. Like it had been around for 10 years, but it was this blood sport that they call with no gloves, and guys could bite and headbutt and all this crazy stuff. And then by the time that 2003, 2004 came around, it was turning into a sport. It was getting sanctioned in all these states, and they had rules and they had gloves, and it was this, and all these different, things to make it more palatable to the mainstream. And I had a couple of people who were training with me who said, "Hey, I'd like to really try getting in the ring, try getting in the cage, and see how I do." And it wasn't legal in California at the time, so we would go down to Mexico, and they had fights just across the border in Tijuana. And we would go down and we'd have matchups, and we'd go down and we'd have a couple of my guys would fight down there. And then about a year later, it became sanctioned and legal in California. And I had a couple guys that were the first guys to fight on the very first ever sanctioned California, legally sanctioned California MMA show. And from then, I've just been, training this fight team, and guys coming to me to learn how to fight, and I've opened up a couple other gyms and worked for a few other places, and then just literally 3.5 weeks ago, after 15 years of doing it, I decided to open up my own gym that is mine and one of my former fighters. We went in partnership and opened up our own gym in my neighborhood, which is pretty exciting, but it's a lot of work.
Well, you were talking about this Mexico thing, and I'm running through my head. I'm going to take a bunch of dudes to go fight in Mexico. What could go wrong?
Right?
Just like, really? That was your plan? I know it's a little more formal than that, but...
Right. Well, it's funny, though, because back then, that actually wasn't that weird, because everyone who wanted to fight would go down there. And Tijuana wasn't like it is now with the drug cartels and all that kind of stuff. Like, it was, you can go down there again now, and back then you could go down there. There was the time where it got really rough was, in between that. But in 2003, 2004, 2005, going across the border was nothing. It was like going to San Diego. Right. So it was just that you could have fights down there. And the show was actually put on by a guy, a husband and wife, or girlfriend, boyfriend, a couple that lived in San Diego. And they actually, one of them is actually a very, very famous fight trainer himself now. He has several UFC champions, and they had the show, and they lived in San Diego, and it was easy for them to go across the border and put it on the nightclub down there. And yeah, it sounds funny. People laugh at it, but it was legit. And the funny thing though is that back then it was not nearly as high level of a sport as it is now. Like now, the athletes are so well trained and they're disciplined and I mean they're high level athletes. But I mean, I remember one of my first fighters. They called and said, "Hey, do you have a guy who fight at 145 pounds?" I said, "When? Next week." So let me ask. And I asked this guy who had been training there for like 2 months, "You want to fight?" "Sure." And we just like, what weight do I have to be? 145? He's like, "Yeah, I can make that. I used to wrestle." And we went down there, and he fought with 2 months of experience. He fought another guy that had 6 months of experience. And the funny thing is that kid went on to be, he owns his own gym now, and he went on to be on one of the major shows, the WEC, which is owned by the UFC, and had a really good career, and was had a documentary made about him. He was a pretty well known fighter, and his first fight, it was literally, "Hey man, you want to fight in a week?" "Sure." Let's go.
And so all these people you train, you get what, 10% of their purse for the rest of their life?
Yeah. Well, 10% of their purse as long as they train under me, but you know. The 10% of what they're making in these local shows is like, that's, you know, hey, we put in 8 weeks of work and I get $100.
Yeah.
You know, but hey, if you know, I'm sure that's how Conor McGregor's trainer was before he got that $10 million paycheck as 10% of his $100 million.
Yeah, it's one of those things. I tell people I'm really lucky that my hobby, the thing I like to do for fun, is to figure out how to do investments. My world would be very, very different if my hobby growing up was macrame, because I'd be selling the shit for $15 on Etsy.
Right.
You know, you just never know how things are going to turn out. If someone wants to have you give a talk or a demonstration, you know, something like that, or MC or host a conference, are you up for that?
Absolutely. I love one of my favorite things to do is host MC and perform comedy at you know, anything science, skepticism, or atheism related.
And so how can people reach you?
So, well, you can find my website is it's skepticcomedian.com. Pretty easy to find.
Yeah.
And yeah, you can find me Twitter or Facebook. My handle is @comediocre, which is a hybrid word of comedy and mediocre. So
yeah,
comediocre. Mediocre with a CO in front of it. And yeah, I mean, I'm pretty easy to find. You just search Ian Harris comedian, I come up pretty quickly. And I'm friends with probably everybody you're friends with on Facebook and Twitter.
Yeah, I found you have a Wikipedia page. How do you do that? I don't have a Wikipedia page.
You know what you need to do is actually it was Susan Gerbic.
Oh, okay. Yep.
She has that whole. They have a whole rational Wikipedia guerrilla.
Yep.
Wikipedia, I forget what they call it, where they're getting people in the community on Wikipedia. And I think I was actually one of the early ones. Like I was one of the first 10 people or so that they got up there. And I think I'm pretty sure they're still doing it. It's a really cool project. So yeah, you should talk to her. And I think there's a whole bunch of people now that do it as well. But, which is good because they got a lot of people that are obviously way more important or notable than myself on Wikipedia. People who really, you know, deserve to be up there, and you know, people still. I know it's not technically a trusted source, but everyone still goes to Wikipedia to find out who people are or what they're talking about. And
Wikipedia has its problems, just like any source can, but I have found it to be very, very helpful. And of course, the citations are phenomenal. And so if you want to chase back sources and you know, you go to the footnotes and the references, you can learn an awful lot in Wikipedia. So I don't want to knock it too much because You can do far worse stumbling around the internet. You could learn about how flat the Earth is or something by accident.
Right. Well, yeah, it's funny because I have a 12-year-old daughter, and they're not allowed to use Wikipedia as a source at all.
Yeah.
And I go, well, I get that it's an editable source, but it's really not that easy. Like, I don't know how to go on and edit Wikipedia, so it's not like any jackass can go on there. But even if so, you have to have the resources, like you're saying. So this idea that we just have to rule out Wikipedia, okay, maybe don't cite it as a source, but it could be a good backup if you found some stuff elsewhere, and to go to Wikipedia and say, hey, well, look, this also this backs us up, or go to Wikipedia as a starting place, and then look at the sources they cited and go to those places and look for your information.
I was just going to tell you,
weird idea.
That's the same thing. My kids had that problem back when they were in junior high and high school. The teachers were just tripping that you couldn't use Wikipedia. You can't use Wikipedia. And I would say, go look in Wikipedia. And they go, I can't use it. And I go, like, you can't. Okay, they're saying you can't cite it, but go into it. And if you see something interesting and there's a citation for it, go check out the citation. You don't have to go find all the citations yourself. They're listed. Like your site, your page on Wikipedia has 24 references. And some of them are different types of fighting styles. Some of them are the different podcasts that you've been on. Some are different atheist conventions you've been to in different organizations, stand-up stuff, videos, PDFs. I mean, it's a lot of information, and they could now say, I'm not citing Wikipedia, I'm citing this other reference.
Yeah, and absolutely. I don't understand why they completely discourage them from using it as a source. Don't use it like anything, though. Don't use any single source as your as your evidence. I mean, have it corroborated and backed up, and find good sources, of course. But that's the thing I did like about Wikipedia is I remember when they were doing the Wikipedia stuff, the person who was entering me in would email me and say, hey, they do research. I did this. I heard this, but I can't find any source to that, and I can't put it in there unless I have a source. And I'd have to go, yeah, there's no source, or, oh, here's the source. But they would call me, or email me periodically and say, hey, we're updating this, or someone wants to make this change to your Wikipedia page. Is there a source for this, or is this valid, and whatever? And I was impressed because, stuff that you couldn't source, they wouldn't put in. It wasn't just like you could just say something and then throw it up on Wikipedia.
Well, Ian, thank you so much for being on the Phil Ferguson Show, and I look forward to seeing you at some future conferences. It's always great to talk to you.
Absolutely.
Hopefully this movie gets picked up or distributed soon, and you can tell me about it, and I can tell everybody. But in the meantime, listeners, go to Netflix and request the show for Ian, and maybe we can get a little more skepticism on Netflix.
That would be cool. That would be great. Thank you so much. Yeah, it's Ian Harris Extraordinary. And by the way, there's a woo thing out there also called Extraordinary by some guy who made a movie about aliens. So make sure you put Ian Harris, otherwise they'll keep putting that, and that's on Netflix. So
and just so everybody knows, Ian, I-A-N, Ian. It can be spelled other ways. I'm not even going to give the other ways because all you need to know for today is I-A-N, Ian Harris, Harris, Extraordinary, right?
Yep, extraordinary.
Extraordinary or extraordinary?
Yes. It's actually both. That's one of the jokes in the movie. It's spelled in the special. It's spelled extraordinary, but I capitalized the O because the joke is that it's not really extraordinary. It's just extraordinary.
I see.
Yeah, it's one of the jokes in the.
So you're quite the witty wordsmith. I like it. All right, everybody, go check out Ian Harris's stuff. Go request his thing. And once again, Ian, thanks for being on the show.
All right, thanks for having me, Phil. Appreciate it.
I'm sorry, but I don't want to be an emperor. That's not my business. I don't want to rule or conquer anyone. I should like to help everyone if possible. Jew, Gentile, black man, white. We all want to help one another. Human beings are like that. We want to live by each other's happiness, not by each other's misery. We don't want to hate and despise one another. In this world, there's room for everyone, and the good earth is rich and can provide for everyone. The way of life can be free and beautiful, but we have lost the way. Greed has poisoned men's souls, has barricaded the world with hate, has goose-stepped us into misery and bloodshed. We have developed speed, but we have shut ourselves in. Machinery that gives abundance has left us in want. Our knowledge has made us cynical, our cleverness hard and unkind. We think too much and feel too little. More than machinery, we need humanity. More than cleverness, we need kindness and gentleness. Without these qualities, life will be violent, and all will be lost. The aeroplane and the radio have brought us closer together. The very nature of these inventions cries out for the goodness in men, cries out for universal brotherhood, for the unity of us all. Even now, my voice is reaching millions throughout the world, millions of despairing men, women, and little children, victims of a system that makes men torture and imprison innocent people. To those who can hear me, I say, do not despair. The misery that is now upon us is but the passing of greed, the bitterness of men who fear the way of human progress. The hate of men will pass, and dictators die, and the power they took from the people will return to the people. And so long as men die, liberty will never perish. Soldiers, don't give yourselves to brutes, men who despise you, enslave you, who regiment your lives, tell you what to do, what to think, and what to feel, who drill you, diet you, treat you like cattle, use you as cannon fodder. Don't give yourselves to these unnatural men with machine minds and machine hearts. You are not machines, you are not cattle, you are men. You have the love of humanity in your hearts. You don't hate, only the unloved hate, the unloved and the unnatural. Soldiers, don't fight for slavery, fight for liberty. In the 17th chapter of St. Luke it is written, the kingdom of God is within man, not one man nor a group of men, but in all men, in you. You, the people, have the power to create machines, the power to create happiness. You, the people, have the power to make this life free and beautiful, to make this life a wonderful adventure. Then in the name of democracy, let us use that power. Let us all unite. Let us fight for a new world, a decent world, that will give men a chance to work, that will give youth a future and old age a security. By the promise of these things, brutes have risen to power, but they lie. They do not fulfill that promise. They never will. Dictators free themselves, but they enslave the people. Now let us fight to fulfill that promise. Let us fight to free the world, to do away with national barriers, to do away with greed, with hate and intolerance. Let us fight for a world of reason, a world where science and progress will lead to all men's happiness. Soldiers, in the name of democracy, let us all unite!
You're listening to The Bill Ferguson Show.
Well, I hope you enjoyed listening to the interview with Ian Harris. I know I enjoyed catching up with him again after just recently meeting at the American Atheist Conference in South Carolina. Of course, hopefully anyone who's a listener in or Florida or even Georgia is surviving the hurricane. Those things are rough. Matter of fact, today, I'm on the 13th, several days after Irma landed. We actually have in Chicagoland a little bit of rain from the hurricane. I think our wind speeds are more like 5, but it's pretty weak up here. Give us a little rain, but hopefully everyone is doing well and staying dry. A couple other things. As you're listening to this, I'm getting ready to leave for the FFRF convention. Or if you're getting the show late, I'm done with the FFRF convention, and I'm sure it was a great time. I have a couple reviews on iTunes. I'm going to get those real quick. And, of course, if you like the show and find value in it, or if you've talked to me and feel bad about me not charging you, you can write a review or make a donation to the Secular Student Alliance. I always encourage that. And I did hear a couple of weeks ago, I mentioned Humanists of Houston were doing a fundraiser, and they told me that after I mentioned it on my show, that their total donations, and they credit a large part of that to my show. I don't know if that's fair or not, but they received almost $7,000 within a few days of my show going live. So I know a few of you emailed me or sent messages on Facebook. If you donated to that cause, thank you. Thank you very much. It's greatly appreciated that I have such an incredibly smart and generous audience. A couple quick reviews here on iTunes. One is by Lindsay126. I'm so glad my brother introduced me to your show. Smart, logical, and often humorous. Thanks, Phil, for all the finance, science, logic, and the listeners. And then we have one from Jared Roasts. Since I saw Phil on the Atheist Experience, I've been blown away by how addicting his show is. It's relevant, smart, snarky, informative, and witty. Phil educates his audience about two topics that are vitally important but often overlooked: investing wisely and thinking skeptically. This show is delivered by a host who can explain sound financial principles in a compelling and clear manner. I'm going to stop there for a second. Sometimes it's really hard to read stuff out loud. It's easier just to say things, but I'll continue. His interviewing style is entertaining and thought-provoking. Phil's signature brand of humor is sprinkled throughout. Let me jump forward because this is long. He also mentions that he called me and I responded and there was no pressure or sales pitch. My business has grown, and it has grown because I have marketed to the secular community, to atheists, to agnostics, and to free thinkers. One of my goals, I stated early on when I started doing that, was to show people you can make money by marketing to atheists. I have now proven that, but yet no one else seems to want to play. So if you are a financial advisor or know one, if you are brave enough and want to market to atheists, let me know. I'll give you some pointers and tips how to do it. I am now at the point where I turn away the vast majority of people that want to hire me, and it breaks my heart. But if you have questions, give me an email, phil@polarisfinancialplanning.com. I will try really hard to contact you back. Please include your phone number, because maybe you'll catch me at a time where I have a few moments. If we can answer your question briefly, I'd be happy to do that. If it takes a little more time, I'll try to fit you into the schedule. So that is always available to the listeners. Well, I don't know about always. Right now, it's available to the listeners. If the show keeps growing, that'll be harder and harder for me to do. So I do appreciate all the listeners. I appreciate people who have brothers that share the show. Apparently to sister, Lindsay, one of the reviewers. If you like the show, again, please leave a comment. Hopefully I can see you at FFRF Convention or some other convention later this year or next year. And if you see me in person, please say hello. Don't be shy. I'm happy to meet you. I look forward to seeing you. I'll talk to you later. Ciao.